Yes, show.
Jack, from your public sector experience.
It's a great nonprofit.
What in your opinion should public sector do to foment innovation? What are the kind of good models for public-private partnership? Obviously, airports gives a lot of money to companies to create new products. But is there any really key insight you have gained for how to come out with new products using public money?
Well, I think that the skill for innovation is neither more prevalent or less prevalent in government than it is in business. So I think there will always be a few people who are interested in doing things the way you might like to be able to do them. And I think every time you find one of those persons, if you're in the private sector trying to work with the government, or if you're in the government trying to work with the private sector, you can find one of those people on the other side and connect with them and work through this problem of how could we do this the way it ought to be done. I think you're on the way to creating an innovation that can save money and make a business or an operation much more efficient. Does that help you at all? I mean,
Yeah, it does.
I can give you an example. When I was in the Air Force in the 80s, I ran the test range that accomplished all the flight testing for all the electronic systems on all the airplanes in the Air Force. And I worked in one operating group of the Air Force. And another operating group of the Air Force supplied the test range assets that we used to accomplish the tests. So my planes flew over the range, and the range did the measuring and calculating and divining, and then they always told us what worked and what didn't in their own terms. And after a while, I found out that almost all of my operations budget was being eaten up by paying for the range. So I tried to start to look and understand where the costs were, and I found out that I didn't get any cost breakouts. I just got bills. And so I asked for the cost breakout, and the guy who was in charge of that part of the Air Force came to see me, and he said, "You've never quite had a request like this. There have been 50 guys in your job before, and we always just give the bill, and you always just pay it. And what is this thing about you want to know what you're paying for?" And I said, "Well, that's called, we're not going to use your range anymore to test if we can't understand what it costs." And so they made a case that I couldn't possibly make such a demand because they couldn't possibly do it, because they didn't possibly have any way to get the information I wanted. So I found two really young, bright guys, and always farm your hardest problems out to the youngest guys, because they'll figure it out way faster than you will. And they came back to me and they said, "We can write these computer programs. It'll take us 5 months, and when we're done, we'll go install it on the mainframe computers at the base, and it will tell us exactly which one of your airplanes used how much time on the range and how much you ought to pay for it." And I said, "Just go ahead and write those programs up. And by the time you're done, I'll get permission to install them." And our range costs went to, get this, 18% of what I've been paying. So I got to be the hero of cost cutting in my part of the Air Force, only by questioning whether I had to pay the bill or not. And that's kind of it's a different kind of innovation, but it started with, how should this really work? Get somebody bright involved, work toward the reasonable goal that everyone can understand. Nobody at the range had a problem understanding what I wanted. They didn't find it particularly attractive, but they understood the value proposition that was encased in the problem. So they couldn't really object, could they? We had to chase it all the way through, hoping against hope that maybe my program wouldn't work, or maybe I'd owe them more money in the end, or something like that. But that's.
But that gets to this just do it, and diverse, finding people outside different organizations who are willing to line up with you and make it happen.
Can I just make one other comment? Innovation that cuts costs is just as profitable as a new product.
Sometimes more so, because
Sometimes more.
you get the advantage in every single thing you're doing.
Yes?
What is your definition of innovation? Either of, what is your definition of innovation? What do you consider innovation?
Well, things that deliver new value propositions, new value that, creates a market, drives revenue, creates new businesses from delivering new value. So it could be a process, it could be a business model, it could be technology, although people often want to talk about how it manifests itself in a product.
I think I would call it finding a way to deliver the desired effect at a better price or faster, or more efficiently.
Howard?
Yeah, those are two very great answers that, I'm struggling to define what innovation is because, adding value is a really critical example. But there's also innovation that creates new demand. There are new products out there that we didn't think we needed that now we use regularly. And that's innovation.
There's fun.
There's texting, where did texting come from? Email and cell phones, it got faster to say 3 words than 50.
Well, I want to comment on that because I think that's interesting, the way you phrase that it's about something that creates new demand. Or is it that we discovered some underserved, unsatisfied job people needed to do that finally got fulfilled? And I think that, if you look into it, so it's an interesting way, is really to the point of how are you then going to discover where those opportunities are. And I think in a part that was sort of underneath Clay Christensen's work, right, about jobs and outcomes and what are the jobs that need to be done. So instead of asking the question about what's the new product you want, because people don't know what they don't have, like texting, right? Or how do you like the ones you got? It's the issue of asking the question of, or analyzing from a whole nother frame of reference, or what are the things that are trying to be accomplished? And how many different ways are there to do that? If you ask that question, like with your issue of, well, how could I figure out what this is going to cost clients? And how many different ways could you approach that problem?
Just a comment on the definition, since we do both in the courses at Hult and at IXL, we've defined business innovation as the creation and capture, so I come to, of new value in new ways through new technology applications, new products, new services, new business products, new business models. So it's through all those things, but it has to be the creation and capture of new value in new ways. So I don't know if that helps, but we've been around this a lot, so I thought I'd throw that out.
I'll just comment on that. There's a lot of creative innovations out there that have never been able to capture the market
The value.
and the value.
That's all the stuff on
The lens.